Blog Talk Radio.
The White House Report.
According to reports, the White House is livid with Stephen King, representative from Iowa. Representative King said, "What if we went back through all the family trees and just pulled out anyone who was a product of rape or incest? Would there be any population of the world left if we do that?" Well, the White House is said to be very upset. President Trump considers it, according to sources, a distraction. Meanwhile, we hear that evangelicals are very upset as well. This is something that could actually encumber the Republican Party when it comes to the president's reelection bid, especially as the president is not doing so well in the state of Iowa. Meanwhile, Iowa Representative Stephen King is also up for re-election. It's going to be a hard-fought one. April Ryan, AURN News.
Hey, good evening and welcome to another edition of the Bachelor Pad, the Bachelor News Radio Network. I'm LA Bachelor. Glad you can join us this evening. If you want to reach out to us, you can call 646-929-0130. Press 1 to get on the line, and we'll see you there. We'll get you on. If comments, questions, you can hit us up on Pad Nation at Facebook. And at Twitter, at Pad Nation 2, the Pad Nation number 2 at Twitter. You can also watch the show on Facebook Live very shortly. I want to bring in my first guest. He's a criminal justice expert. Had him on before to talk about not only the mass shootings, but some solutions, if possible, to gun control, gun violence. He is Patrick Fitzgibbons. And Patrick, good to have you on again, my friend.
Hey, LA, thanks for having me on, brother.
Good, man. So the last time we had you on, we were talking about a lot of the shootings, some of the incidents, the reasons why, and others. I want to focus in on the gun part. But before that, can you give us a visual understanding of the carnage that happens being in law enforcement, of those assault weapons that, you know, generally people use, military people use in war, as opposed to people on the streets that get their hands on it, or people who have their hands on it legally.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't imagine. You know, I've never been in one of those situations. I've been in situations like that after the fact, but never been in those types of situations. And, you know, chaos, I mean, hysteria, fear, panic, every one of the adjectives I just said and more are going through people's minds when something like this happens. And we talked about it before, LA, and the frightening thing is it's becoming more prevalent, it seems.
So do we go overboard when you hear, or actually just to get your opinion, when you hear of churches and movie theaters, and you may see armed people at nightclubs? We saw the shooting. We found out that the shooter there was on all kinds of drugs, not mental, but he was certainly chemically under the influence of cocaine and all this other stuff the report says today. But are we going too far in terms of safety and trying to live our lives if we have weapons to secure in, say, churches and synagogues and libraries and places like that? Are we going too far?
Look, I think you have to live your life. I mean, that's what people want. Some people want. They want to terrorize people to get them to stay indoors and never come out. But you have to live your life. Now, I think we can do things to mitigate certain areas. Soft targets is what we call them, like synagogues and churches and, movie theaters, like you indicated, LA. I mean, it's a sad reality, but that's where we are at in the United States now in this country. So, like I said, we can mitigate. We can hire security. We can hire off-duty police officers to be in these places to kind of, God forbid, stop a threat should it occur. But you got to live your life, man. You can't live it in fear.
So what do you do? What are some of the signs that we talked about? People reporting, unusual activities, unusual sort of personalities and characters and things of that nature with some people. But again, this guy seemed normal in Dayton. He just kind of went back and forth. He went in the club, he left the club, but he was actually extremely high. So, what are some, not only the signs, but some of the preventative measures we can take to protect ourselves?
Well, I mean, first of all have a plan. We talked about the signs before, but anytime I go into a place, LA, and I'm sure some of your listeners do too, and this is just how I was trained and how I was taught throughout the years in the military and law enforcement, but any layperson can do it. So when you go into a place, a venue, a nightclub, whatever, just take a second or two and say, all right, those are the exits. If you know what hits the fan, that's where I'm going. Evacuate, regardless of whether, others agree to follow a certain person. So don't sit there and, take time. If you know what hits the fan, get out. Leave your belongings behind, if they're away from you. Those are just a couple tips, like I said, be cognizant. We talked about this before, man. Get your head out of your phone. Notice the people around you. I like to go with your gut. If something feels weird, it probably is. So, this stuff isn't complicated. It's just, we live in the society right now, man, where you just have to be more cognizant. You have to be aware of your surroundings. Have an escape plan, have a plan. That's what first and foremost, like I said, I go over it with my family. Okay, if something like this happens, now some people might call me paranoid, but we have a plan. And I would advise the listeners to have a plan too, wherever they're at.
Talking with Patrick Fitzgibbons here on the Bachelor News radio show. And Patrick, what if you're stuck in the midst of a shooter and you can't get out? It seems like the bullets around. I listened to a lot of people said that they were running one way because they heard the bullets behind them. So they naturally went the opposite way. So what do you do? Especially with your military background and skills, how do you kind of combat that? Do you try to fight your way through it, or do you wait for help? What would you do?
Well, I wouldn't advise anybody to that should be your last option. The last option should be, take action against the shooter. If you, throwing whatever, using improvised weapons, hell, grab a goddamn fire extinguisher off the wall and wait till somebody comes in the room. If you can surprise the shooter or shooters, that should be the last thing you do. But, you have a better chance of survival if you try to take down the shooter rather if you're just sitting there. But things that you can do to mitigate it, if you're caught in an active shooter situation, is be out of the active shooter's view. That's first and foremost. Provide, get protection. There's a difference between cover and concealment. I think we talked about it before. Cover is something that's going to block bullets. Concealment isn't. Think of a bush. That's concealment. It's not cover. Bullets go right through. So, don't trap yourself into an area where you're restricted for movement. Those are just a couple suggestions, but like we talked about, if you have to confront the shooter, do so hopefully with other people and agree that you're going to try to take them down. You have a better chance of survival, or her down, but most of them are men, if not all of them.
Is there a difference in terms of these mass shootings because the person may be ill, or mass shootings because the person lost their job, or mass shootings because there's a hate crime? They go into a synagogue and want to kill Jews or kill blacks or kill the Mexicans, whatever. Is there differences there in terms of the signs that we may see, especially again with your background? Would you say there's some differences in terms of looking for some of the signs, especially if law enforcement has to get involved?
Yeah, I would say that there's signs, out there with some of these people, whether or not they're directing, they're targeting certain groups, African Americans, Jews. A lot of times people like this, I think, to do this, to go in there and kill innocent people, you have to be mentally on course. You have to be, something's wrong with you. But most of the time, LA, whether you're attacking a certain group or whatever, most people are going to get on there. They're going to have a manifesto. They're going to have something online. They're going to use the internet. They're going to use social media. So that's one of the things. At least the first thing that law enforcement does is they start digging into the background of the suspect and looking at to see if the signs were there. Now, unfortunately, people miss the signs sometimes, and unfortunately or fortunately, we can catch some of these people. I think there was I read somewhere where I can't remember where, LA, and I apologize, but some firefighter, I think it was in Texas somewhere. This is an extreme example, but he was stopped nonetheless. Some guy was walking around in Walmart with a bulletproof vest on, and a firefighter took him down.
I think it was Vegas. I think it was in Las
Vegas.
Is what it happened.
So I think that sometimes, like you indicated, I think like the recent shooter. I mean, he was acting weird. He was going inside and out. He was high, but other times, more than likely, there's some sort of signs leading up to it. And a lot of these signs, man, like we were talking about. I mean, it's if somebody's acting weird. If something doesn't seem right, now definitions of weird are going to be different, but call the police, man. I mean, that's what the police are there for. I can't tell you how many times people would call us up and say, hey, this person is acting strange. And the police get there, they talk to him or her, and it turns out to be nothing. But I think a lot of times people are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be that person, that calls and something doesn't happen or something's perfectly, it's all right, nothing's going to happen. But you have to do that. I mean, that's what law enforcement is here for. We can't do things unless we know, unless we have the information. We rely on the people. So hopefully, people will be more apt to call when they see something strange or, they want somebody checked out, because it really starts with that.
But in fairness, though, Patrick, when you look at this, though, isn't it a little? Don't we have to be a little cautious, though, in the sense that, and especially in this climate, that if you're calling the police on something you think is suspicious, it might be a person of color, and then it's misread based on the climate that we're in right now with this whole racial climate, that might be a false call. But somebody's calling you. We've seen it on social media, and somebody's using their phone and calling it because there's a black guy in the neighborhood. He's maybe not necessarily you've seen him there before, or even in cases where someone may just didn't take their medicine or something, and they could be diabetic and just acting weird because of that. Don't we run the risk of sort of false calling, if you will, to authorities, or are you just saying err on the side of caution?
Absolutely. I think there's always people we don't know. Law enforcement is just acting, on people who are calling the police. And absolutely, LA, people sometimes have ulterior motives when they call the police, but I think it's incumbent upon law enforcement to get as much information as they can and to do a proper, contact when they contact him or her. I mean, this happened to me, a couple of years ago, as a police officer. Somebody called up and said, hey, there's an African-American walking around this neighborhood. And I said, okay, what else? And they said, well, that's it. I said, well, I'm not going. So I think it's incumbent. You can't do that. So, officers have to be smart. Law enforcement has to be smart. I think we live in a heightened time right now, obviously in the United States. So, people are going to be, people are going to call the police, and, you're going to have those calls where people think something weird is going on, and police are going to get there, and hopefully most of the time it's going to turn out to be nothing. But I do believe, like you indicated, LA, we have to be very careful. We have to treat those situations delicately sometimes, because like you indicated, just because you're African American in a neighborhood doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, or Hispanic or whatever. And sometimes people for their medication. We're talking about mental illness. That's one of the issues what we have now in the United States. There's a lot of people now that can't get the mental help that they need, and they don't have access to prescription medication that can keep them, quote, balanced. And law enforcement is dealing with that on a daily basis, it seems like. So, you have to take all that in consideration.
But in fairness to, even in that regard, in terms of, I'm not a a doctor or anything like that. I don't know all your background, but to me, there's a difference between SNAP and mental illness. Mental illness to me is as defined as a chemical imbalance and one somewhat. So I guess what I'm saying to get your thoughts on, if someone snaps and decides they just want to kill for whatever reason, is different from someone being off their meds and then trying to harm themselves or harm somebody else. Because, I mean, statistics show it's less than 3%. It's about 3% of mentally ill try to harm people. They typically want to harm themselves if they're going to do any harm. So that debate is a little skewed. I mean, because, like I said, someone could have lost their job or lost their stock, or I've worked with compulsive gamblers that want to go out and kill people because they lost it all. So that's not really, to me, that's not mental illness. That's someone just kind of snapping and doing something irrational in the moment.
Well, I mean, I think it's gonna, the officers are gonna go. They're gonna, they're going to investigate. I mean, that's what the cops do, and that's just, if somebody calls the police now, like barring, like with the example I gave, with the person calling because that person was walking in a neighborhood that African American, I'm like, well, what else is there? Well, there's nothing. Well, because he just didn't, I took that as, he just assumed that this poor guy was going to be doing something wrong because of his color. But officers, for the most part, they're going to go and investigate, because they're probably going to have more information. So I don't know, L.A., I mean, if you think we shouldn't go, or I don't know what exactly the question is.
No, my question or comment to you was that I think it's an unfair debate to put these incidents on mentally ill. I think that's what's been. I think that's what, quite frankly, NRA people or people who own guns or people have this boogeyman mentality that their Second Amendment rights are going to be violated and they're going to come collect guns. So and because of that, they push it on the mentally ill, and I think that's wrong because the statistics don't bear that out at all. They don't go around killing people. I mean, it's 3%, and they normally try to harm themselves.
But I think you can agree, L.A., maybe not, but anybody who goes in to anywhere with the intent of inflicting as much human casualty on people, something is wrong upstairs. Now, yes, maybe they snapped, maybe they lost their job, maybe they lost all their money, who knows? Maybe they got divorced. All horrible. But how many of that happens every day? I mean, that happens to people, millions of people every day. How many people snap and go start killing people? So I guess
Patrick,
my point is,
but they have to be diagnosed as something, schizophrenia, something. You can't say they're mentally ill if they haven't been diagnosed as mentally ill. We don't know unless they've been diagnosed.
But how many people, LA? How many people aren't diagnosed that are probably mentally ill? So I just think that anybody that can go in, kill a bunch of people, something's wrong upstairs. I mean, something is wrong upstairs, even if they don't have a diagnosis.
And so that's when you have to that's when you have to investigate. The situation in El Paso was a hate crime. The situation in Dayton was the guy was high on stuff. They said cocaine and all other kinds of stuff. That's not. I mean, he might have needed some meds, and was still the stuff coming out. But that night when he shot and killed 9 people, he was on all kinds of drugs. That's not mentally ill. That's somebody high as a kite. You've seen it as a officer. When somebody's on meth or something, that might just be somebody binging. That doesn't mean they're crazy. It just means that they're on some kind of drugs that in that particular case in Dayton. And I think again, the notion and the I think it's really wrong to push it on somebody being mentally ill unless they have a history of it. And we don't know until after, God forbid, it happens, the carnage is there, then you do the investigation. Yeah, okay, they were crazy or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, but I guess I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but again, I mean, how many people get high every day? They're shooting up heroin, they're shooting up meth, or they're high on coke that go out and kill people. So, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I guess we're at an impasse. So, I guess the question I have for you is, so the solution is to take everybody's guns, or take guns, or certain guns. Or
no, see, and that's where I'm telling you that's where the debate is going. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't. I do, now listen. I feel, I've owned a gun, but I feel like I don't need an AK-47 to go kill Bambi in the woods. What do you need that for?
I agree with you.
I mean, what do you need that for? And to me, Patrick, being in law enforcement, I think if anybody should be pushing for these type of weapons, military weapons, off the streets, is law enforcement, because you have to. Your job is to go into danger.
Sure.
You're going into bullets. Why you want to fight? You got a 9 or something like that, and they're pumping out rounds 30, 40, 50 at a time. You pumping out a couple at a time. It behooves you not to want to get these off the streets if you're an officer, because you got a higher chance of getting killed by something that's going to pump out that much artillery.
I agree.
Rather than what you know what I mean? Even with
I agree 100%. But LA, so say we have a magic wand and we, poof, now ARs and AKs, they're illegal. So what do you do? I know with all the millions and millions of weapons that are still on the street, in people's homes. I mean, what do? You go door to door? You want a civil war? That ain't going to happen. So I mean, it's I don't know the solution. All I'm just saying is, so I think it's tricky. I mean, there are buyback programs and something like stuff like that some municipalities and states, but you're really not getting the stuff that needs to be off the street.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing. That's like saying, how do you stop murder? I mean, people are human beings. What I'm saying is that people have to be open to these type of solutions. It's almost like instead of, if you take some of those off the streets and out of the hands of the bad guys and whoever else, then the carnage won't be as bad. Now that's not a solution, but this man, both of these people killed multiple people within seconds and minutes. That's that's unconscionable. I mean,
I agree.
So I'm not saying that you're going to get rid of all, because bad people want to do bad things. The old saying is they asked the robber, why did you rob a bank? Well, that's where the money is. I mean, that's what they're going to do. But if you try to cut it back, right, then it won't be as bad. And my question to you is, why gun owners and pro-gun people are so against just any kind of comprehensive gun control, gun measures, gun backgrounds, background checks and things of that nature.
Well, we have gun background checks. I mean, I think that's a misnomer with some people. The Gun Control Act of 1968, regulates firearms on a federal level. There are background checks in all states, that prohibit certain people from getting weapons. So we have laws on the books. But I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, to say everybody out there. We just had a discussion in LA, and I have guns, I have rifles, and I just said, look, I don't think rifles or AKs need to be out in the general public, but I'm one person. Right. Now, why does everybody else, or I shouldn't say everybody else, there's a lot of people out there that cling to Second Amendment and say, look, we have a right to bear arms. That's really what it boils down to, the Second Amendment. Now, I agree with you, LA. I think there needs to be a discussion about it. I think we need to be open. You and I just had a discussion. I'm open to it.
Right.
I hope we get to that point where we need to be open to have these critical discussions, because we can't keep going the way we are. There needs to be some solutions, tangible solutions that we can come to agreement on.
Yeah, and I don't think when the Constitution was written, I don't think our forefathers, was thinking about these military weapons.
Yeah, exactly.
The right to bear arms. And I'm with you. I certainly have no notion. I'm not one of these, bleeding liberals that want to say, okay, well, or make you feel like, we're going to take all your guns. That's just insane. That would never happen, like in this country. You could never just take people's property like that. That's the whole debate is really false. When people, that just tells me people don't really want to have a real discussion about it. Well, I think these, they're going to start. No, that's not.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think once you start talking about, gun debates and getting some of these guns off the street, I think that's the immediate mindset of where some people's mind go. And you're really not going to, you're never going to solve anything. You're never going to come to any kind of agreement if you just go directly there. There has to be an open, honest dialogue.
Absolutely. I can't let you go without talking about your podcast and how people can listen to it and how they can follow you, Patrick.
Well, LA, once again, brother, thank you for having me on. You're the man. I love your show. People, if people want to find me, they can find me at cjevolution.com. I have a criminal justice podcast, top ranked, and I have people, LA, from not just criminal justice professionals, but I have people on there that talk about the importance of nutrition, mindset, communication experts. I mean, so all different kinds of people. That come on the show, even people that are anti-police. I've had anti-police people on the show because I want to hear their side of the story. So, I mean, just a great show, man. And it's growing because of, listeners that want to know, what police do. And, because most people, LA, you probably know this. I mean, they only get what they know about the police through movies and, television shows and stuff. So, check it out. I'd appreciate it. cjevolution.com. It's a great show.
I'm sure it is. And I will be checking it out, and we'll be, if it's okay with you, post your information on our website so people can
absolutely
can follow you there. Patrick, as always, I appreciate it. We'll have you on again. Thanks for coming on this evening. God bless, and be safe, sir.
All right. Thank you, brother. Bye-bye.
All right, man. Patrick Fitzgibbons is, of course, good to have him on. Fitzgibbons, I say, having him on, criminal justice expert. We're going to take a break, come back and get Dr. Wilmer J. Leon on, talk some politics, talk about the two women of color, the congresswomen and women that have been blocked by Israel for going there to their country. We'll talk about that and other things with Dr. Wilmer J. Leon III on the pad. Stay tuned.
Feel good, don't it? Come on. Do you wanna make it better?
The White House Report.
According to reports, the White House is livid with Stephen King, representative from Iowa. Representative King said, what if we went back through all the family trees and just pulled out anyone who was a product of rape or incest? Would there be any population of the world left if we do that? Well, the White House is said to be very upset. President Trump considers it, according to sources, a distraction. Meanwhile, we hear that evangelicals are very upset as well. This is something that could actually encumber the Republican Party when it comes to the president's reelection bid, especially as the president is not doing so well in the state of Iowa. Meanwhile, Iowa Representative Stephen King is also up for re-election. It's going to be a hard-fought one. April Ryan, AURN News.
Welcome back to the pad. We go back to the phones, bring in our next guest. Always good to have him make a house call. He is a syndicated talk show host and a best-selling author of Politics, Another Perspective, working on some other stuff. Always, he is Dr. Wilmer J. Leon III. Doc, good to have you on, sir.
My brother, as always, it's an honor and a pleasure.
Had to play that. Wanted to get your thoughts on it. Not, this guy's been making all these type of comments for years, racially and sexually and otherwise. Liz Cheney finally comes out. I think she's the highest ranked Republican in the House. She calls for him to step down. McCarthy says it's troubling, but he doesn't call for it. Ultimately, isn't it upon Iowans in the fourth district there in Iowa to push back and I'm sure conservative Republicans or moderate Republicans are going to probably push somebody in the primaries to try to get him out of there, but it's up to the voters. And ultimately, doesn't it speak to their racism and everything else if they keep voting this guy in all the time?
Well, he is a representative of the state of Iowa, and right. the fact that he continues to get reelected speaks volumes about the mindset and perspective of Republicans in Iowa. This is, I guess you'd say, the ugly part of democracy. Not everybody that gets elected. Well, let me put it another way. Stephen King represents a particular mindset that has always existed in the United States. And so he's nothing new. He's not a creation of Donald Trump. It's just, this is H. Rap Brown said that hatred, or no, I'm sorry, said that violence, and in this instance we could substitute that with racism, is as American as cherry pie. You remember Stephen King was the one that tweeted back in 2017 that culture and demographics are our destiny. We can't restore our civilization with somebody else's babies.
Right.
That ties direct. As much as he wants to disavow white nationalism, that statement, "We can't restore our civilization with somebody else's babies," is the whole replacement theory. So the guy is a fraud. Go ahead.
But Doc, isn't he, Trump Jr.? He speaks like Trump. He says the same things like Trump.
No.
Let me finish though. And the caption of Iowa people who vote for him are similar to that 30-something% of white nationalists that support and vote for Trump.
But you're making a mistake by tying it to Trump. It's not Trump. It's America. Next week we are going to celebrate. Well, I'm sorry. We're going to commemorate the 400th year of the first enslaved Africans landing at Port Comfort, Virginia.
Yeah.
400 years. Read the Virginia slave codes of the 1800s. A slave master can't be convicted of murdering a slave because no one in their right mind would destroy their own estate. That's where we were relegated to being things. Read Dred Scott, Supreme Court Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Taney, said that we have always been less than human, and that a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Read the Constitution and the Three-Fifths Compromise and the fugitive slave provision and the fact that slavery was allowed, the importation of enslaved Africans was allowed to exist for 25 years after the Constitution was ratified. This is America. You make a very serious mistake when you tie this to Donald Trump. He is not the progenitor. He is the accelerator.
Sure, but in the climate of the now, he sounds like Donald Trump. I understand the broader picture of what you're saying. But what I'm saying is that Iowa and
Donald Trump sounds like Stephen King. Donald Trump sounds like Tom Tancredo from the Tea Party, and we want our country back. See, I just wrote a piece. You can find it on a number of places, Black Star News, and I know that Hazel Trice-Edney through the Trice-Edney News Service has distributed the piece. Trump is ignorant, but he's not stupid. Donald Trump is playing politics with race. With racism. And in my opinion, when you keep focusing on Donald Trump, you're taking your eye off the ball, and then that also then leads to an analysis and a mindset that Donald Trump is stupid, and you wind up playing him cheap. Just ask Hillary Clinton. So we got to get away from this is Donald Trump and that this is Donald Trump's fault. No, he's not the progenitor. He is the accelerator.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
I didn't say you
what
did.
I said is, right, but what I'm saying is you compare them
that
up.
Wasn't a personal use. That wasn't a personal use.
No.
That was a collective use.
No, what I'm saying is the 4th District in Iowa is a microcosm of society, and he is the leader of this country. So they sound like they twins, is my point. Everything they say, all this, send them back home, and their attacks on Brown. Stephen King, I remember, I forgot what year, he was talking about building the wall and putting the wires around it, and if they touch it, they get shocked. He said, we do this with animals all the time. We do this with animals all the time. So, I mean, the fact is, that my point, I think you agree, the fact is that these people in Iowa want to complain. They're just like society, where these people who snub their nose and turn their head because they want these Supreme Court people at the federal level and the lower levels on the court circuits, right? They want them people in there, so they just tolerate it, and that's what they did. They're tolerating this bigot, racist person like Stephen King, and they vote for him because they figure he's got their best personal agenda, in place for them, and that's why they keep voting him in. So it speaks more to the people in Iowa who keep voting for him than Stephen King himself, and that's something that we see.
I agree with that.
Yep, we see across the country. Let me ask you this, just to switch gears a little bit. I wanted to ask you, Jay-Z, a person who decided not to perform at the Super Bowl, who actually tried to clown the NFL, in one of his songs, a couple of his songs, with his wife Beyonce in the video and stuff like that, has paired up with the NFL now with this long-term agreement, allegedly to help with social issues and all types of stuff to bring forth some kind of collaboration, some kind of understanding of social injustices as it relates to black and brown people. And my thing is, call it for what it is. It's a business deal, because how do you get in bed with the NFL after you already said that you wouldn't, and you also just discredit or just kick to the curb Colin Kaepernick, who has been banned from the NFL as being a quarterback, able quarterback, been in the Super Bowl before, but they have colluded against him, all 32 NFL teams. How do you even try to, rationale and make it seem like you're doing this for social justice? I mean, we have a saying in the hood, if don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. I mean, it's right there. Just say it's a business deal, but don't try to hide behind social issues and social injustices. You're in this thing to make money. Your thoughts?
Didn't Sean Corey Carter, who now goes by the name of Jay-Z, wasn't he a drug dealer in Brooklyn?
That's right.
He's a businessman. He's a hustler. And I bring up that point. I'm not throwing stones at him. I'm just citing the facts. He's always been a hustler. Hey, as they say, a brother's got to get paid. He's a capitalist. So what do you expect? He's doing what he do.
Yeah.
He wasn't that concerned about the community in them slinging days in Brooklyn, and he's not concerned about the community now. That's understand who he is and understand what he is. And again, I'm not. What did Don Corleone say? I'm not cursing a man for his business. You're free to do what you do so long as your interests don't conflict with my interests. So,
yep.
That's that. He sold out Colin Kaepernick. So he's sitting there with the commissioner of the NFL,
Roger Goodell.
Mm-hmm. Roger Goodell. And so why doesn't he say, hey, Roger, look, would love to do this deal with you, but here's the thing. We got to get Cap on a team. If as a league you really want to show the black community that you're not what people perceive you as, you got to get Cap on a squad. Oh, and Roger would say, oh, well, I can't do that. Well, hell, you kept him off the squad, and don't tell me that you didn't. So do you think the Washington football franchise, not that I'd ever want to see him go there, but as destitute as they are and as in need of a quarterback as they are, don't you think that he would at least warrant a tryout? With luck, having no luck in Indianapolis, don't you think that he could fit in somewhere there? Possibly down in Tampa? So,
yep.
And then Jay-Z, if you're really about it, you step to the mic and you say, this is what I've said to the commissioner. I want to do this deal. Here's the condition. We got to get Cap on a squad.
Yep.
And, but again, dude started making his money slinging crack in Brooklyn. So,
right.
you know, and again, I want to be very clear. He's not doing that anymore. He found the error of his ways. He has changed his life. He's a legitimate businessman. God bless him.
Yep.
But
let's keep it
the
real.
mindset hasn't changed. Hey,
Right.
man, do what you do.
Talking with Dr. Wilmer J. Leon, of course, a syndicated talk show host, author of Politics, Another Perspective. Very good book, which we'll talk about before he gets out of here. Doc, Representative Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar have been barred from Israel, a visit that should have happened. I mean, freshman Congress folks do this every year just to find out on the ground, if you will, what is going on between the Palestinians and Israel, the relations. Instead of hearing about it, they want to go see it and talk to the people and that kind of thing. So it's nothing unusual for these two people. It's unusual for them to bar someone, but we know why. The allegations of being pro-Palestinian. This idiot tweets out, Israel's weak if they allow him. That just goes back to his issues with these women of color. And, what does this do in terms of strain, not just from, the relations between Congress and this sinister Benjamin Netanyahu, who I think is very crooked, and more specifically with the Democratic Party. I mean, I know McCarthy and some of the other ones on the Republican side have said this is wrong. They shouldn't block them. Everybody should in Congress should be able to go. It's been going on forever. But specifically when it comes to Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party, and even in the Senate with Democrats, what does this do in terms of the relationship between them and Israel?
Well, a couple of things before I answer that. One, Netanyahu's move is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of weakness.
Yep.
What's he afraid of? What's he afraid of? Or what's he scared of? If your game is that tight, if you're that right, then why wouldn't you allow 2 female Congress members to come to your country? What are you afraid of? You're just a big punk. That's all you are. And he knows that if they come, that's a narrative he can't control. And control of the narrative is what gives him the most power. So contrary to what Trump is demonstrating or misperceiving as strength, hey, if you're Manny Pacquiao, you take all comers, right? If you're Floyd Mayweather, you take all comers. Now we know that Floyd didn't fight Manny till Manny got old, but that's a conversation for another time. if you're the baddest man out there, you take all comers. And obviously, Netanyahu is not the baddest man out there because he can't deal with Rashida Tlaib and he can't deal with Ilhan Omar. Now, what does this say? What does it say about the Democratic Party? They're just as sick as the Republicans are because they get their funding from the same sources. Their allegiance is to the same racist, Zionist government that the Republicans are allied with. And so what Nancy Pelosi should have done is step to the mic and said, all right, BB, you're not welcome in the Congress as long as I'm the Speaker of the House. You can come to the country because I can't control that, but you're not coming into the House of Representatives because I control that. And if you disrespect my membership, you disrespect me.
Don't they run he runs the risk of really straining not just with the Democrats, but the Palestinians have a few more allies now in the world with that whole debate, that whole clash, the whole situation there, that strain as it is. But it, even even the more abroad, isn't he running a risk of damaging some relationships based on that, with the UN and other countries?
Has he run afoul of that yet?
No,
I don't think so. Well,
Yeah.
he ain't gonna run afoul of it now. I see your point, but history is replete. He can't run afoul of the UN because the U.S. is in control to a great degree, with being on the Security Council and having veto power. So long as the United States is backing Netanyahu can do what he wants to do. For the most part.
Yeah.
The issue for him has to come internally, not externally. And there are a lot more Israelis that are getting fed up with Netanyahu, but it hasn't reached the tipping point yet. And so, his margins, he's like Trump. His margins are getting thinner, but he's still able to hold power.
Doc, I want you to, if you could briefly, there's a lot of people that don't understand not only the friction and clash in Hong Kong, but how Hong Kong is being sort of directed by China. The handover of Hong Kong, that whole sovereignty thing, where I think it was back in '97 when the UK ended their administration of the colony there, turned it over to China with the endorsement of the United States. Explain that and why this is really crucial. China and what we know what he's not going to do, but what the administration should be doing as it relates to this.
Well, I don't believe that the unrest that you're seeing in China is as organic as mainstream American media is making it out to be. Now, so for what people need to understand is that I believe in 2047, Hong Kong is supposed to turn over to China. And what started this was this extradition law, which, when you really understand it, makes a whole lot of sense. You had people from Taiwan and you had people from Hong Kong that were going to China, committing crime, and then going back to Taiwan or going back to China going back to Hong Kong without the ability of being extradited. So for the crimes, and there were some really gruesome crimes that were committed by Taiwanese. There was a guy in Taiwan that went on vacation with his girlfriend in China to China. While they were on vacation, she told him that she was pregnant by another man. He got angry, chopped her into little pieces and put her in a suitcase, and then went back to Taiwan. And because there's no extradition treaty, he wasn't able to be tried for his crimes. So this extradition issue is a real issue. Now, in fact, the extradition treaty wasn't imposed upon Hong Kong by China. It was initiated by the what is her title? The mayor of Hong Kong?
Right.
It was initiated by the mayor of Hong Kong. Now, that got defeated, and so, but I just wanted people to understand, get a sense of what the initial issue was. From what I understand, there are a number of American so-called democracy organizations that are really just fronts for the CIA to go into countries and create unrest. There are these types of organizations that have sensed this opportunity of unrest in Hong Kong and have gone in and are really fanning the flames of unrest amongst primarily college-age students. And so this is not so much of an organic movement of indigenous Hong Kongers against China. This is American manipulation, trying to do two things: put pressure on China as it relates to Taiwan, and also try to get China to fight another front, to try to get China to fight on another front as the U.S. is engaged in these trade wars.
So as always, our influence undercover at least is pushing this whole unrest, if you will, in Hong Kong.
Yes, just the same way that the United States is doing it in Venezuela, the same way that the United States is doing it in Haiti, the way that the United States did it in Iran, the same way that the United States invaded Iraq. It's all part of the same American foreign policy. And one of the mistakes that a lot of people make when they try to assess Carrie Lam, she's the chief executive of that's her title, chief executive of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam.
Right.
Was the
she
one
was handpicked by China, though, right? I believe she was handpicked by China. If I'm not mistaken. I think she was.
That I don't know. But the proposed law was initiated by Carrie Lam. It was not initiated by mainland China, contrary to what many in U.S. media will try to pass off as fact. So people, unfortunately, don't read, don't understand history, and they have very short memories, so they can't connect the dots. But again, Venezuela and Hugo Chavez and the current president, I'm drawing a blank on his name. What the United States is doing in Venezuela, it's the same thing that they're trying to do in China. That they're trying to do in Hong Kong.
Doc, before you go, I wanted to touch on the wage or the wealth gap in this country.
The National Endowment for Democracy. That's the name of the group it's funding pro-Western groups that were formerly funded by the CIA, but the CIA had to get directly out of that business because it didn't look good. So they've created groups like the National Endowment for Democracy, and under that title, then people think that they're just an innocuous pro-democracy group. But what they do is they go into places like Hong Kong. They find susceptible groups. Is there a reason why these Hong Kongers are waving American flags and singing the American national anthem? Does that make sense?
Right.
And that's the same story that I'm saying about the Jeffrey Epstein. Does that story make sense? And
right.
I was saying this. I've been saying this since the guy died. I'm not saying that it's a conspiracy theory. What I'm saying is the story you're telling me does not make sense. And what do we find out now today from the autopsy? Oh, he may have been strangled.
Right, and the likelihood of it, based on the bones broken in his neck, definitely seems like he was strangled.
Exactly. So, okay,
Yep.
you were going to ask me about what now?
Well, I wanted to talk about the wealth gap. The New York Times put out an article called "A Vast Wealth Gap Driven by Segregation, Redlining, Evictions, and Exclusion Separates Black and White America." And put Brown America in there as well. I wanted to throw some statistics at you too, Doc. And these are sources people can Google and look up. Median households in this country, white households, 171,000 is their household income. Blacks, $17,600. So blacks make up 13% of the country, but only 3% of the wealth. Now, when the Times touched on segregation, redlining, evictions, exclusions, separate them, share your thoughts on that, and particularly in this day and age where, we keep hearing from this clown in Pennsylvania Avenue talking about he's done so much for blacks and unemployment's down. But again, that's like being the world's tallest midgets. If you're at 30% in unemployment, I'm making up a number, in the African American community, and it goes down to 20%, does that mean that we've overcome? Like we're in the melting pot of wealth and prosperity? But share your thoughts on this wealth gap as it relates to segregation, redlining, and I would say even, just all and out racism and discrimination.
Well, there's a great line in that piece that you mentioned that says the period that followed the Civil War was one of economic terror and wealth stripping that has left black people at lasting economic disadvantage. Then the next paragraph says, today's racial wealth gap is perhaps the most glaring legacy of American slavery and the violent economic dispossession that followed. So all we're seeing in 2019 is the continued result of, again, what America has always been. And so you can look at the financial crisis from what was it, 10 years ago? And look at the decimation that caused in the black community as people lost their homes. And which is why I always say that President Barack Obama failed the black community by bailing out the bank and not bailing out the homeowner.
Yeah.
If the toxic loans, if the toxic mortgages were a major contributor to the crash, then the way you solve the problem from a honest, lasting perspective is you make the mortgages solid, allowing the homeowner to keep their home, which means the community stays stable, which means schools don't have their budgets cut because school budgets tend to come from property taxes, so the value of the property stays up. But that's just one example. We are experiencing the result and the legacy of ongoing racism in America. It has never ended. So whether it's Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1923 and the burning down of Tulsa, whether it's the Red Summer of 1919, whether it's the decimation from the financial crash, whether it was not allowing black soldiers who came here after World War II, even though they had the GI Bill, there were still so many schools in the country that would not allow them access. even though they had not FHA, what was the military home loan?
Right.
I can't remember what it was called, but the program for veterans to borrow money to buy homes, redlining in the neighborhoods, they could go and borrow money, but because of redlining, they couldn't move into neighborhoods. So by being locked out of those neighborhoods, by being locked out of those higher value properties, as white people's wealth rose as a result of property values rising, we were locked out of those opportunities and put into lower value properties. So our properties did not appreciate at the same level that white properties appreciate. And it still goes on today. So it's not only redlining, it's what they call block busting. You still hear the stories and see the studies of a white person sees an ad for an apartment in a newspaper, and they go and they apply for it and they get it. Or a black person goes first and they're told, oh, it was just rented. Then a white person comes in right behind them, working with the same organization. Oh, yeah, we can give it to you right now. That stuff still goes on. Or looking at the names on resumes. And, Kiana Washington, who I will assume is an African-American young lady, will not get the interview that Penelope Smith gets, or Sinead O'Connor. So it amazes me how, now because white nationalism and talking about white nationalism has become the buzzword over the last couple of weeks.
And he messed up the credit too.
Absolutely. But now that white nationalism is the buzzword of the day, as a result of the El Paso shooting and the shooting in Gilroy, California, and the shooting in Dayton, Ohio, even though the Dayton, Ohio shooter has not been, the motive behind that shooting has not been determined yet. Now all of a sudden people want to talk about white nationalism. So now we're getting flooded with these articles, which is good. Better late than never. But they're putting out all this data as though it's, look what we've just found out. Well, how long have I been on your show? How many years have I been calling into this show? And how many years have I been saying what I'm saying? Right? LA. LA. You there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Don't know what happened there.
Go
ahead.
Just quick, did you hear me?
Yeah, I did. And I was saying it's almost like this welcome to the party type thing.
Exactly.
Like we've already been there.
Haven't we, though? The question is, well, where y'all been?
Right. Right.
Where y'all been?
Before you go, Doc, let people know how they can reach out to you, talk about your book, and where they can find that as well, sir.
The book is, you can find the book at wilmerleon.com. At wilmerleon.com, it's called Politics, Another Perspective, Commentary and Analysis on Race, War, Ethics, and the American Political Landscape in the Age of Obama. Don't let the age of Obama fool you, because it's a collection of op-eds that are divided into sections: race, war, ethics, and the American political landscape. It's a commentary and analysis on the various issues in those subject matter areas. and I think the analysis is still relevant. There are introductions to each section that really, I think, make those pieces evergreen. There's also, in the epilogue, some early Trump analysis, which is still valid today. So you can go to wilmerleon.com and get an autographed copy of Politics, Another Perspective.
Doc, I can't let you go. I know you probably pressed for a little bit of time, but Reggie Howell's on the line. I know he got a question or two before you hang up, sir.
No problem.
That's okay.
Not a problem, man.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Hey, my friend, please accept my tardiness, but I was doing honeydew duty, Doc. You know about that being married, right, brother?
Yes, yes, sir, I do. Yes, sir, I do.
The boss wanted some things, and I had to do honeydew time. But on a serious tip, Doc, first of all, thank you for what you do. Need you on my boy Gary Flowers show, so please hurry up and come on back down there. So we got some damage control to do.
I'll make that happen. Absolutely.
Thank you.
What's up?
2 points. Jay-Z, to me, when a group of billionaires get together and say, look, Negro, we run this show, and we know that's been over a year since he's been back and forth with the commissioner. I just want to thank Jay-Z for taking his piece of silver, and now he's being known as Miss Beyonce, no more Jay-Z. I'm going to call Miss Beyonce. Why? And I'm not trying to be sexy when I say that. If we look at what happened in New Jersey with the new basketball arena where the NBA team plays the Nets, he was part of that eminent domain and ran some deal with housing back then. So, and my question to you, sir, the community, especially young folks now, do they understand the damage he's done, or do you think it'll be business as usual and they won't care? And the follow-up, if I may.
I don't think that they don't understand, and so their lack of caring is out of ignorance. And I've had to have some real conversations with my son about some of Jay-Z's music and trying to get my son to understand the bigger picture. And bopping your head to the beat. Yeah, I understand that, but it's much deeper than that. So I haven't heard Wilmer play any Jay-Z stuff in a while, so hopefully some of what I'm telling him is sinking in.
Right. And one follow-up, 44 said that Reagan was his favorite president.
Yes, he did.
He was one of the biggest racists. The Clintons were Goldwater helpers. Even Hillary was a Barry Goldwater girl in their early 20s. And you can't get more racist than Barry Goldwater and Strom Thurmond. And saying that, number one, where's the Democrat urban policy for the inner city? I haven't heard anybody, including the individual from California, which I have issues with her, but that's a whole other 2-hour show. Or why is it that, once again, we see that women, like Auntie Maxine and others, not afraid to take on the battle, but it seems like the men are wearing diapers and don't want to get involved in the Democratic Party, especially the Black Caucus?
Well, I think that's a kind of a reflection of the way that our politics has always been. You've had those that are willing to stand on the front line and pitch battle, and then you've got those who would prefer to stand on the sideline and try to get what my main man Tom Porter calls the near position. They're just happy to be close to power, to be near power. They're not actually trying to assume any power or demonstrate any power. So, that's unfortunately, that mindset is still too prevalent within too many of our elected representatives. And and Flint and the water in Flint, Michigan, is a perfect example of that. As former President Barack Obama sat there with a glass of water, I spoke to the woman whose law firm is handling the case on behalf of the residents of Flint. And I asked her, as soon as I said President Obama coming to Flint, she went, "Oh my goodness." And I said, what do you mean? And she said, he did more damage to our cause than anyone could ever imagine.
I believe it.
And he could have sent the Army Corps of Engineers in there.
Mm-hmm.
He could have.
But he didn't.
He could have used. No, he didn't. He could have used the bully pulpit to call greater national attention to that problem and pressed upon Congress, find the money to fix this problem. And he didn't do it.
Now, see, Doc, you're going to get these black women mad at you, like taking their Jesus away.
Hey,
how dare you?
Well, my wife gets mad at me, and my wife gets mad at me, and I can handle that. So, LA, like I said, I take all comers, man. I take all comers.
I can't wait to see him with the family. I can't wait to see him with them. Appreciate it.
Well, look, hey, and Doc, we'll just send all the hate mail to 1313 Mockingbird Lane. That's where you live, and you can take it from there.
Yes, send it to Mr. Adams. But look, but LA, here's my thing. I don't mind the hate mail. Just tell me where I'm wrong.
And just
don't tell me you don't like what I'm saying. Don't tell me or don't ask me why are you quote unquote attacking Barack Obama. No, tell me where I'm wrong. And don't tell me, oh, you don't understand what he was up against. Don't start your paragraph with that ridiculous statement. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Thank you.
So all about the research too. If you absolutely stand by, Reg. If people would do their research, and then I would rather them come back and say, here's why you're wrong, and here's why, and they have something to present to you, rather than just say, oh, you're just stupid, or you're just wrong, and I don't like the way, because that's the natural reaction for a lot of people.
You're an Uncle Tom. You're look at the damage. You're speaking for the Republican Party. I'm just telling y'all the truth.
Right.
I'm just telling you the truth. That's all.
Well, anyone that listens to me and this broadcast knows that I've mixed a mixed bag when it comes to former President Barack Obama. Doc, I'll let you go, man. I appreciate the extended time. God bless. We'll talk with you soon.
Hey, thank you much. Looking forward to talking to you next week.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Dr. Wilmer J. Leon making a house call. We're going to take a break, come back on the pass. Stay tuned.
just wanna make you feel good now. Feel good, don't it? Come on. Do you wanna make it better? Wanna make it right? Come on. Do you wanna stay together? I meant when I said it. And it's easier to run away than to look for what would make you stay. Do you wanna make it better? Do you wanna stay together? If you do, then let's please make some new memories. Do you wanna make it better? Do you wanna stay together? If you do, then let's please make some new memories. Do you wanna make it better? Wanna stay together? If you do, then let's please make some new memories. Do you wanna make it better? Do you wanna stay Steady love. Steady love. Steady love. Steady love. The way that he looks at me when he holds my hand, he wants everyone to know I'm his woman and he is my man. We can talk about anything, he's got nothing to hide. He's not afraid of his feelings, he's not a slave to his pride. He's giving me love so steady. He touches my heart, now I'm ready. He touches my soul and my spirit. He's giving me love so steady, so steady. Steady love. Steady love. I have never met a man that I wanted to be his wife. And then he came along. It's so natural to make a life. 'Cause he's a perfect compliment. 'Cause I'm a boss in my world. But when we're together, he just makes me feel like his girl. He's giving me love so steady. He touches my heart, now I'm ready. He touches my soul and my spirit. He's giving me love so steady. He puts every other man I've ever known to shame. I just wanna be with him, talk to him, sleep near him, walk with him, be with him. I wanna be lovers and friends and mother his children, make breakfast on Sunday and fight and then make up again. 'Cause if life's gonna be crazy anyway, I wanna do it with you. Steady love. Hey. Steady love. He's a good father. He's a good cook. He loves his basketball and he loves a good book. I'll tell you how I know he's the perfect one for me. 'Cause he's a warrior in the streets, but He's a king in the sheets. He's giving me love, so steady. He touches my heart. Now I'm ready. He touches my soul and my spirit. He's giving me love, so steady. He's giving me love, so steady. He touches my soul and my spirit.
The White House Report.
President Trump is going in on Anthony Scaramucci, the man he fired 2 years ago, who only worked for 11 days as his communications director. But meanwhile, Anthony Scaramucci is firing back, saying because of President Trump's rhetoric, his racial rhetoric in particular on Twitter, he is not going to support him for his re-election bid. With all of this between the president and Anthony Scaramucci, of course, he is now receiving death threats. Scaramucci acknowledged that to me on an email this weekend. Meanwhile, Scaramucci says that he is appalled at the president and how he has handled matters of race. He even said within our emails that he is upset with how the president has handled me. Meanwhile, all of this on the second anniversary of the Charlottesville massacre. April Ryan, AURN News.
The White House Report.
Acting U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Ken Cuccinelli is standing firm on his edit of the quote emblazoned on the Statue of Liberty. The actual text of the poem reads, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." Cuccinelli, in defending the federal government's efforts to prevent illegal and legal immigrants from getting public assistance in the form of housing vouchers and welfare and other forms of federal help, Cuccinelli said, "Give me your tired, your poor, who can stand on their own 2 feet and who will not become a public charge," he said Tuesday morning during an interview with NPR. Meanwhile, according to the Trump administration's Labor Department, stats show immigrants take less in welfare benefits than U.S. citizens. Meanwhile, the poorest part of America is Appalachia. Appalachia is in Senator Mitch McConnell's district. Those in Appalachia, white America. April Ryan, AURN News.
The White House Report.
According to reports, the White House is livid with Stephen King, representative from Iowa. Representative King said, "What if we went back through all the family trees and just pulled out anyone who was a product of rape or incest? Would there be any population of the world left if we do that?" Well, the White House is said to be very upset. President Trump considers it, according to sources, a distraction. Meanwhile, we hear that evangelicals are very upset as well. This is something that could actually encumber the Republican Party when it comes to the president's re-election bid, especially as the president is not doing so well in the state of Iowa. Meanwhile, Iowa Representative Stephen King is also up for re-election. It's going to be a hard-fought one. April Ryan, AURN News.
Welcome back to the pad. We thank you for joining us. Just a couple of programming notes. You can listen to every show, not just the Bachelor News show, but some of our other shows, the Donaldson Files, of course, Dr. Larry's show, Locker Talk, and others at our website, thebachelorpadnetwork.com, thebachelorpadnetwork.com. On the homepage, you can hear the shows. It's got music and everything in between. So you can enjoy, or you can go to each person's individual show and listen to that show in particular. I just want to remind people that you can also watch us live tonight through the duration on Facebook. Back to Reggie Howe in Richmond, Virginia. Reggie, I played a few things in a row because I want to get your thoughts on it before we get to Luke Williams, our next guest.
Yes, sir.
You know, Anthony Scaramucci. It's always been a funny character. I think he's funny. Some of the things he said. I mean, his rhetoric and connecting himself with this racist is one thing. I just thought he was funny. But, again, like I said to Dr. Leon, in regards to something else, welcome to the party. how serious do you take Scaramucci? Do you think at some point, if Trump says, "Okay, well, come on back," he's gonna flip again, and next thing you know, he's back in the White House? Of course, as April Ryan mentioned, he was only there for 11 days before.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is anything negative that the occupier, the colonizer of the White House 45 can obtain negative publicity is fine with me. I don't care what direction it comes. Like Dr. Leon said, better late than never. And I would say this, that as long as he has infighting on that side, and let's be honest about something, you have crazies on the side of 45 that do a lot of wolfing and everything. But I'm saying again, white America needs to come to grips with the hatred of what this individual has done. When he comes for the brown people, eventually he's going to be coming for you, being the Jews. So it's time to stand up, go ahead and organize yourself. It's time to take this guy out as well as time to take people out in the Senate, like Mitch McConnell. They have single-handedly hurt this economy. We saw what happened in the stock market yesterday. We've seen farmers already hurting. We've already seen agriculture. And the bottom line, again, in my humble opinion, the more people start to get their guard down, the more people start to get a spine on the Republican side, the more that 45 is going to start to be in flux, and he's going to start lashing out. And eventually he'll start lashing out to the wrong people that can hurt him.
Well, I got to say, just as a side note, I understand the struggles of some people, but, these farmers that are claiming, poverty all of a sudden are the same ones who voted for him. And the same ones, in a lot of cases too, Reggie, in a lot of cases are the same people who are against, public assistance or welfare, but they're getting corporate welfare. They're getting a handout right now. So what's the difference?
Yes, sir.
Again,
he who has the gold rule, history is his story. When the mainstream media, including MSNBC, CNN especially, are not telling the truth about corporate welfare, about who really is on welfare, there are more Europeans on welfare than anything people of color. Once they start telling the truth, then we can turn the light. But the light has all been shined on the boogeyman, being people of color. They always use us as a whipping board. Now, eventually, that's going to change.
Let me ask you this. I got a email from someone that said that heard our discussion towards the end with you, myself, and Dr. Leon on Barack Obama, and the question is, why does it seem that most black men or more black men seem to not like Barack Obama?
Again, the person being intellectually dishonest. As Dr. Leon said, we were talking politics. We were talking an issue, especially Flint, which was a political. It was nothing to do with 44 personally. We told the facts. Now, again, to that emailer, get your head out your ass and listen to the conversation. It was not we didn't like him. We talked about his policies. So stop being intellectually dishonest. You sound like a certain person that's a part of the Heritage Foundation that talks ignorance. I'm not going to put up with it. So the bottom line is get your head out your ass, listen to the conversation, then come back and talk to me. And tell me, where were we wrong about 44 when it came to Flint, Michigan? Where were we wrong when we said that 44 for some reason have a love affair with Ronald Reagan, one of the biggest racists out there? Again, show us where we're wrong. We just talking about his policies and his thoughts. Nobody said nothing personal about 44. We just said that we didn't like his policies. What's the problem?
Well, that's a pretty strong response. And maybe they weren't talking about a personal attack, but maybe attack on his presidency. I guess it's more so.
It's fair game. He was weak. I'm sorry. I know he's not an Adam Clayton Powell. I know he's not fiery. He's not even a Colin Powell. But damn it, he had an opportunity to do more and stop being accurate to people who want to take him out. And I'm not going to keep my mouth shut. Auntie Maxine Waters had more of a spine than he did. And look, she done had death threats and people want to come after her talking about that she's using illegal funds from her husband banking. All that was false. And she's not afraid to stand up to 45 the occupier of the White House, the white supremacists. But for some reason, these Negroes, these black men, all of a sudden have a problem. There's always been the black woman that stood there with the bow that broke against the wave of injustice to move forward.
You hear the other moment with April Ryan about the Statue of Liberty and how this administration tries to change it and shape it not only to continue this attack on social programs, but more importantly, the attack on immigration. Basically going from which he still feels that these immigrants that are black and brown that come here are rapists and we're getting the worst of the worst, to this whole narrative of how they are they need to come here and be ready to work and not get on social programs. We see now they're trying to define green cards and reshape that whole situation where now you can't, you have to have a certain kind of education and a certain kind of, but bottom line is that this president wants to make sure, he said it in the past, you've heard him, Reggie, that, we should take immigrants, basically paraphrasing, from places like Denmark and places like, which in Sweden, yeah. And what do they have in common?
White places.
Yep.
The white places. And just be honest, it's kind of funny to all these clowns out here who will show their lack of intellectual honesty. When they marched those people out of Mississippi, the chicken farms, I didn't see too many people running to get those jobs. Where were the Europeans out there that claim they're taking our jobs? Hell, they didn't have a job fair just to fill those positions. I wonder why. Yeah. And I got to say this, L.A., for all these clowns out here, black as well as black folks that believe the rhetoric of this white supremacist who say, I am a self-proclaimed nationalist. Y'all the same ones that sitting up in here, stock market hurting you, the same sorry-ass ones sitting up in here, and all of a sudden your 401k is dropping. You the same sorry-ass one that voted for this clown, and he's the same one that when it came to filing your income taxes, you didn't get no money back. And the teachers that voted for him, oh, my God. Y'all really got, well, I ain't going to say it's a family show, but all I'm saying is that, hey, how does it feel now paying the money back that you thought you was going to use to pay for that vacation or pay down the down payment of a boat? Didn't get the
this thing is gonna get worse, Reggie, because by all accounts, the economy is going to take a dive. It really had an effect. I don't know a lot of people that own stock. They always talk about the stock is up and this and that. We're not even educated enough in some cases to train to understand how stock works, let alone owning it. So this thing continues to take a nosedive. All that's coming out of this president's mouth is what he's been saying that's been antagonizing people all the time, which is race and racial divide, because he can't hang his hat on the economy. So everything that's coming out of his mouth now is going to be about sending them back to wherever. These people and the deplorables that when Hillary said it, they went crazy. He can say it and get away with it, when he talks about a certain group. So this thing is going to get really ugly, and I fear that it's going to get very violent because of it. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Well, like I said before, L.A., the sad part about it is that you got people who've been conned by this con artist, including black folks. And for the European women out there, Lucy, you got some explaining to do. This man has made so many derogatory comments against women, and we know what he said about grabbing. I'm just trying to figure out how in the world did over 50% of European women vote for this guy. If that's an aphrodisiac, I don't want no parts of it. I don't understand.
Well, it's the same thing, though, Reggie. It's the same thing, Reggie. As I open up the show, we were talking about Stephen King, and I ran that piece there, and his comments. They're joined at the hip. Everything that one says, the other one says the same thing. And Iowa and the people who vote for Stephen King is a microcosm of what this country is doing and what this country is about with this current occupier of the White House. It's the same thing. They're saying the same thing. The only thing is difference is Stephen King is saying it to constituents in the 4th District of Iowa. That's the only difference. But they're saying the same thing, and they believe the same thing, and this country believes the same thing. I'm not saying all. I never say all. But there's a portion of people who look for the black boogeyman or the brown boogeyman. Every time something goes wrong in this country, economics, anything else under the sun, it's somebody of color's fault. It's been going on since the beginning of this country. It's nothing different. And that's why you see the wage gap and the wealth gap in this country, as I mentioned. I mean, I want people to understand and let this sink in for a minute. And you know it, Reggie. Household medians in this country, think about this. White homes or white people in median homes, $171,000 is their average income. In black homes, it's $17,600. Look at the gap. And we make up 13% of the country. We're only getting 3% of the prosperity. That's not a coincidence. That's why Doc was talking about, the redlining and we see gerrymandering. Everything that's going on continues to go on. And then when you have these evil, and they are people that spew this hate all the time because they want to blame someone, and it's always us, then it's gonna get worse. Look at my first guest, who I respect. We had civil discussion and disagreement. He's a law enforcement guy, and the talking points is with these gun shootings and mass violence that's taking place is on the mentally ill. 3% of the mentally ill commit these heinous crimes. First of all, any person in the health field will tell you, doctors and all, the mentally ill people typically, they're chemically imbalanced, typically want to harm themselves first, if anything. They don't want to harm other people. They may be off their meds or whatever. And this notion that people go out and shoot people are crazy. They first of all, they haven't been diagnosed. Second of all, it doesn't happen like that. And it's a discussion to put it off on someone else is my point. If it's economics, it's black people fault. If it's guns, it's mental crazy people. They put it off on everybody else because they don't want to have real conversations, real discussions, and make real change in this country. So they look for deflectors and they look for people to blame, Reggie.
Well, that's what I said before. Della Roos, the one that went in and shot those angels in South Carolina, his manifesto said he wanted to start a race war. I guess he was crazy. But again, see, that's why I don't deal with individuals like your first guest, because you know me, LA, we done had this conversation privately. I'm done talking to people with talking points because they are spreading this poison of 45. I'm not going to deal with it because if I do, I'm going to go off and you're not going to have a show. So I'd rather just go ahead and say, don't bother me. You know how I am.
No, and I can understand. Yeah, I can understand. We've had that we've had that conversation. Yeah. But I also think that you have to allow people to hang themselves. And when they call and they talk that stuff, and they don't have the facts, and they just kind of blurt things out. And I'm not saying the first guest that was the case, but when you put them on the spot, yeah, and if you put them on the spot, then they have to come up with something. I had a guest on last week, and we were talking about how. Why is it that America looks at, well, I said if these shootings were predominantly people of color, would gun laws change? You said no, it wouldn't. He said, I didn't think about that, and that's my point. Make them think, make them do the research. We can have a civil discussion, but don't come at me with, this is wrong and with no facts to back it up. So that's,
and I'll tell LA real quick. You had black folks in Chicago, it got so bad that they was asking the National Guard to come in. That's how bad the shooting was. Now, they weren't mentally ill. Those were just, unfortunately, their poverty and also the vicious cycle going on in Chicago as well as California. So it's two sides of the coin. But when we have, again, mass shooting and people who have come out from the white supremacists, and you look at that manifest, and they even come out and say that we are here to target certain individuals. Even the FBI said now we got a growing problem, and the terrorist is the white supremacist. And this administration has purposely cut the budget of law enforcement not to go after them.
Right, and the government tries to make it seem like it's not a serious issue. I see Luke Williams on the line, but I want to give you a chance to respond to the emailer that wrote back and says that you didn't answer the question without being. You can't answer the question without being insulting. Shows your lack of intelligence. They said since they've been listening to the show. Hold on, let me finish. Let me finish what this. Let me finish what they wrote. Since they've been listening to this show, you have always said nothing negative about Obama. Talking about telling the truth, he is only talking his truth, which is a bunch of bullshit he put together in his head. Now, that's what they said. You said so.
And again, if you're being intellectually dishonest, I'm not going to waste my time with ignorance. So have a nice day, and keep listening to the show. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh man, and on that note, Reggie, as we bring in Luke Williams coming into a little firestorm, but Luke Williams, of course, he's the owner and publisher of the Black College Sports Page, Switch Gears, and Luke, I appreciate you coming on, sir.
Yeah, I apologize, guys, for being late, and then long story, but yeah, I'm glad to be with you guys again.
Absolutely, man. No worries. I want to touch on something we've been discussing. I know Reggie and I have talked about it, T-Mac and others. We might have talked about this, Luke, before we get to your page. The dilemma of Division II schools, with it's football season, so let's say football for now, of playing the money game, the quote-unquote money game, as opposed to playing a top-tier Division II out-of-conference game or games. We had Tim Chavous on, the head football coach, as you know, at Saint Augustine University, and he said, listen, we're playing Lenoir-Rhyne, I think they're playing Wingate. You know, this works better for us. You know, we can, if we win these games, we build our resume, and then, you know, if we win the Southern Division, hey, we got a really legitimate shot at making the playoffs. That's his theory and thinking that might be the way to go. Is that better, or is it better for them to take the money to build the facilities, to make sure you got more money to go out and recruit better talent so you can win these games and sort of become sort of the Tuskegee of the D2, which in large part a lot of people feel could be a D1 team in itself?
Well, the reality is that the quote-unquote money games are not as prevalent on the Division II level than they are, say, on the FCS level. Excuse me. The real money games are when you play the Power 5 schools or even beyond the Power 5 schools, the other Division I conferences. That's when you really make the money. You don't really make a lot of money with Division IIs, first of all. The number of times that they play up, you know, play up in the sense of basically what is two levels above them, which is the FBS level, you know, and I, without looking at the schedule, and I just did the schedules a couple of weeks ago, there weren't a lot of those kind of games that, you know, where you want to make, you know, big six-figure numbers, $350,000, $400,000. That's what an A&T does when it plays East Carolina. That's what an A&T is going to get when he plays Duke this year. That's what an A&T has gotten in the past when they played at Kent State from the MAC even. I think that was a $300,000 or $350,000 payday. It's not as game changing, I guess you could say. It's not as lucrative when Division IIs play up. Then when they do that, they do get big paychecks. But I mean, you're talking about people like Delaware State and Savannah State. One year, Savannah State played Michigan and played, Michigan and Arizona, and each payday was like $650,000. But as you can tell, even with those influxes of cash, it wasn't enough to keep Savannah State in the MEAC and in the FCS. They dropped back to Division II in the process of dropping back to Division II. So no, what Coach at Saint Augustine's was telling you is very true. That it's much better for them to play high-ranked Division II. It doesn't even have to be high-ranked Division II. It can be, teams that are not necessarily high-ranked, but that is going to pay off more for them than going up, which, and 99% of the time, there's no shot that they have against playing the FBS teams. And I think there's some money when the Division IIs play the FCS teams. There's some money in exchange, but it's nowhere near the kind of money that can be, that can change your program or a big influx into your program. And then even when you play these games, the reality is that money doesn't come back to the athletic program. That money comes back to the university. The university decides how they're going to spend that money. And in some cases, it's part of the coach's contract to play some of these games, to play so many games, to bring in so much money, knowing that the only revenue-producing sports that you have are basically basketball and football. Those are the only ones that generate the kind of income, the kind of revenue, the kind of attendance, that's going to seriously contribute to your bottom line. So that's what the mix is. It doesn't really affect as much the Division II programs as it does those in the FCS.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Carl Luke Williams. He is the owner and publisher of the Black College Sports page here on the Bachelor News Radio Network. I want to remind people you got about 8 minutes before you lose the live feed. So if you want to continue to listen live, if we go past the top of the hour, you need to dial in at 646-929-0130, 646-929-0130. Lute, is there any kind of benefit for HBCU FCS teams going down to play Division II? And if Division II, in the case I bring up Saint Augustine, they're playing Lenoir-Rhyne, is there money involved with them going on the road to play a top 5 team like this team?
No, I don't know. It depends on the contract, depends on what the athletic director negotiates, depending upon a lot of those factors. That's really what it comes down to. Generally, when you're playing in your own division, there's not going to be any exchange. Usually, the exchange is a home for home, whereas this year, St. Augustine's will go to Lenoir-Rhyne. Next year, Lenoir-Rhyne will come to St. Augustine's. That's generally how it works. That's generally the way these contracts are formulated. Especially when you're in the same division. And no, there's practically no benefit to dropping down for an FCS, for example, for an A&T to play at Winston-Salem State. Even though there would be a benefit for A&T because it would be a sellout for A&T, it would be a sellout for Winston-Salem State. But in terms of their ranking and where they're, how they are looked at in terms of any kind of ranking in the conference, a Division II win is a zero. And there's no benefit whatsoever, especially in terms of the playoff possibilities. And if you happen to lose, it can be a detriment, but it cannot be a plus for you. In other words, when they are doing the rankings, that game with a win over Division II would not even be factored in, because the bottom line is FCS is expected, because it has more scholarships, is expected to win, so it gets no points whatsoever. And they do use some kind of a point system, but you get no points whatsoever for beating a Division II. Now, what people have been hankering for is that the Winston-Salem State, North Carolina A&T rivalry is as big as A&T and North Carolina Central. The crowds would, every time they play, it would be a sellout. It would be a boom financially to the school, but it would be a detriment to the program. And what happened was when Winston-Salem played A&T and beat A&T a couple of times, that was really the knock. And A&T was saying there's really nothing in it for us. Every other year we get a good payday, but other than that, on the field, it's a detriment. So it's better to stay away from those games.
Yeah, and I had Fred Whitted on last night. You know him. He was talking about, A&T don't want to play us now because we beat them the last time. But it'd be that quick, quote unquote, quick money though. If if at least the HBCUs, you would think, have the rivalry game. I know Winston's going to play Central, but that's not really the same as A&T down the street.
Well,
so
wouldn't
the rival games make it? Okay, go ahead.
Well, it's not really that much different. Central and Winston are almost big rivals, A&T and Central. Maybe just a little bit. A&T and Winston, because like you're talking about proximity, Central is one way on the interstate and Winston-Salem State the other. A&T's kind of in the middle, so both of them were big rivals for them. But
right.
Yeah, but if Winston-Salem State beats Central, then Central can forget any idea, whatever it does in the MEAC. And particularly, there's only been one time since we started the Celebration Bowl that a team out of the MEAC that didn't win the championship went to the playoffs, and that was A&T the year that they actually tied for the championship, didn't qualify for the Celebration Bowl, and they did get a berth to the 1AA, which is now FCS playoffs. But yes, right. Central is playing A&T, and it will be of no benefit to Central in regards to its ranking in the FCS. It will count as a 0 if they win, but if they lose, right. It will be a negative. Why Central put them on the schedule this year is a good question. I'm not even sure.
Yeah, coming in a little bit muffled too, Lute. Just so you know, talking with Lute Williams here on a pad. Before I go to Reggie, Lute, there's been some discussions that unifying the Big Four, not just where they switch around. We've seen Savannah State move and all that kind of stuff, but the few independents left and the NAIA, which gets to me zero coverage in terms of media coverage. Wouldn't it behoove them not to just join those schools, to join the West Virginia League or whatever it's called in West Virginia, some of these other conferences and these NAIAs, to join the Big Four, to make not only the Big Four better, but bigger, and sharing that exposure and even in the revenues, if you will?
Well, that was a dream at one point, but that dream ended in 1970 when 7 schools, I think it was, decided to jettison from the CIAA and join and create the MEAC, along with a couple other schools that had been in the SIAC. It was all about that Division I pot of gold, so to speak, that was really, from a basketball standpoint, was the Division I pot of gold was the prize, or it was really what was the pot of gold that they thought was at the end of that rainbow, of that Division I rainbow. And those schools had basically decided around that time, around 1970, that they were going nowhere with the money from Division II. They were not making any progress. They were not making, there was no growth potential in staying in Division II. And because many schools at that time were starting to move into Division I, the MEAC as well as the SWAC took their time making that decision. Because, as you said, all of those natural rivalries that existed for those years, they were very hesitant to break them up. The CIAA tournament was a sellout. The CIAA tournament was as big as it could be, and it really broke my heart as a HBCU fan, and at that time a college student, or about to be a college student, that when that conference broke up, when the CIAA broke up, and Howard and North Carolina Central and North Carolina A&T and others decided that they were going to leave, Morgan State and others decided they were going to leave the CIAA to join the MEAC. So, no, the things that at this point are so polarized that that's never even in discussion at this point. They've kind of separated themselves. At one point, I thought what was going to happen in L.A. was that all of the state schools were going to be either in the SWAC or the MEAC, and all of the private schools were going to end up being in Division II. And it played out that way for the most part, but there were some, like Virginia State and Elizabeth City, that are both state schools in Virginia and North Carolina, never made the jump. And I think when they assessed what it would be and what it would cost and what it would require to do that, both of them decided
that was not a move that they were going to make. So as it is now, in the MEAC, you only have Bethune-Cookman as a private school, and I think that may be the only one in the conference. I'm not looking. Hampton was when they were in the conference in the MEAC. They've gone to the Big South. So most of the schools, the South Carolina State, even the Savannah State when they were there, A&T Central, Howard is a private school, I'm sorry. But Delaware State,
right.
Maryland Eastern Shore, all of these are state institutions where the finances, the money is primarily coming from the state, a greater amount of money than those private schools can get that allows them to contemplate that. And that's why I thought Virginia State might consider it. I didn't think Elizabeth City State would, just based on its size and its enrollment. But Virginia State, I thought, may give it some consideration, and they still may give it some consideration. But I think that, the powers that be, when you look at something like Virginia State building this big new basketball arena a couple of years ago, it may make you think, what are they thinking? How are they thinking? What are they looking forward to in the future? May they make that kind of jump, But that's what it comes down to. It really comes down to the money, the facilities, the revenue that you can allocate for athletics that the university can bring in. And until you identify that, there's not going to be. So there's no move afoot that I can see in any kind of way about making somehow bringing everybody together. That's a ship that has failed from my perspective.
Wow, a long time ago from your perspective too. So
yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. Talking with Luke Williams, of course, he is the owner and publisher of the Black College Sports Page. Get into how you can find that and follow him as well a little bit later. 646-929-0130. Ask questions on Facebook at Pat Nation, on Pat Nation 2 at Twitter. With that, I go to my good friend, a Virginia State alum himself, Reggie Howell.
What's up, family?
Doing fine, Reg. How you, my brother?
We dealing with clowns on emails that are intellectually dishonest and ignorant. So, I'm sorry. I was supposed to hate myself. I had to get that shot in. But no, look, the historical, I call it NFL Black College game, which will be played in Canton, Ohio. I want to get your thoughts on that and a follow-up, if I may, on that game to Alabama A&M and Morgan and Morehouse.
Yeah, it's a good move, Reggie, and it's really related to a couple of things. Number one, Doug Williams and James Shaq Harris, two former NFL quarterbacks out of Grambling State University under Eddie Robinson. They're the ones who came up with the idea 8-9 years ago of the Black College Football Hall of Fame. And the reason is because there were so many black college greats that played in the NFL who made a name for themselves at HBCUs that are not going to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But from an HBCU perspective, they certainly are worthy of Hall of Fame consideration. They may not have numbers that would get them into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but they were standouts, and there are a long list of them. And many of them are already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the Walter Paytons, the Jerry Rices, the Buck Buchanans, the Mel Blunts. All of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. The Leroy Kellys, they're there. But there are a lot of other HBCU guys who were tremendous, not only on the HBCU level, whether they played in the NFL or not. They were outstanding players in college. Some of them got opportunities in the NFL. Some of them didn't. Willie Satellite Titan, the guy who threw to Jerry Rice and broke every kind of record in college football before Steve McNair came along and broke those records. He never got a shot in the NFL. Never got even into – he got a little sniff at one point. But anyway, he deserves to be in the Black College Football Hall of Fame. So anyway, they've done this for like 9 or 10 years. They've had all of their events in Atlanta, Georgia, at the College Football Hall of Fame. But they got an offer from the Pro Football Hall of Fame, who was building a multi-million-dollar wing to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It started off, I can't remember the exact number, but it started off as like an $80 million project. It ended up being an $800 million project. It was going to be all kinds of village they were going to build, senior citizens, residences, and they brought in the guy who's running the Pro Football Hall of Fame now. His name is David Baker. He's a guy who had put together a similar kind of development, a multi-million-dollar, almost billion-dollar development in another location that he had developed. They brought it into the Hall of Fame basically to usher this thing through. So part of that was that they would create a special wing of the Pro Football Hall of Fame that would house the Black College Football Hall of Fame. And, man, this really, to the dismay of the people in Atlanta, they were like, how could you do better than Atlanta as a destination for the Black College Football Hall of Fame? But they basically offered Shaq and Doug a deal they couldn't refuse,